Hey there, everybody. This is Jay Frost speaking to you from, of course, in this case, my kitchen. But don't let that put you off. This is still the Philanthropy Mastermind series brought to you by our friends at DonorSearch. They have nothing to do with food. They have a lot to do with understanding your donors. We will not be talking about them, however. So if you're here for that, you can find out more about the work, and I hope you'll be interested in that, by checking out their website at donorsearch.net, where under the resources tab, you'll learn a lot about the Philanthropy Mastermind series as well. This is session number 578, if my math is correct. And it's an exciting one, both for the topic and for our guest, who's a special guest today. And I'll tell you all about that in a second too. But first, I just want to say hello and welcome. And I see that already you've taken Jack's suggestion and you are lighting up the chat. So I am so appreciative of that. Please join all of our friends there. I just see some names right now, Denise and Cara and Eric and Jennifer and Daniel. Join them in saying hello. And Nairobi, Daniel, I think you make the longest distance to be here. And I just want to shout out that. But I do appreciate my friends in Bristol, Virginia, which is not far away from where Jack and I reside. Hello, Toronto. It's great to see you too, and all of you. This is a topic which really is global in nature, and that is we're going to be talking about unleashing the power of digital marketing to amplify donor acquisition and lifetime value. That's a lot of words for something that in some senses is very technical, but in many ways is really about understanding some simple concepts, applying them in a robust way, with some really thoughtful approach to building on the relationships, which I think our donors already think they have. And sometimes we just forget to show them that we care. We're going to learn a lot about that from a person who knows both the technical aspects here, but also really how to make fundraising work. And so once again, do use the chat, use the Q&A throughout. We're going to be monitoring both and integrating your questions, your thoughts into the conversation today. So it's really a pleasure to introduce Eric Tamales. Eric is, if you don't know this already, Director of Business Development and Chief Evangelist, one of my favorite titles, for Virtuous. If you do not know Virtuous, he may tell you a little bit about them in a minute, but I urge you to check them out. There's a word that comes up a lot in the discussion we'll have today, which has to do with responsive fundraising. And while that is associated, of course, with the work that they do and he does, I would say it's really a word that should motivate all of us. And so we're going to hear a lot about that today. And just a brief thumbnail sketch about Eric's background. He, of course, has served in the sector for about 20 years. He was Chief Development Officer at the Boy Scouts of America and Laurel Highlands, Vice President for Development at Allegheny Health, Vice President, True Sense Marketing, Regional Director at St. Jude's, et cetera, is the king of Siam, might say. And so Eric really has the chops, but he's also, as you probably saw from a little post I did on LinkedIn, definitely the Energizer Bunny of development, which is to say he has not only the thought and the knowledge, but the energy unlike anybody else in this sector. And that's why I'm so, so grateful that he is able to come here and talk with us today. Thank you so much, Eric, for hanging out.
Jay, do you want to join my fan club? You can be like an executive board member in a second, right? That's a great intro. Thank you so much. It just warms my heart. So yeah.
Well, you are an awesome guy, but you really bring it. It doesn't matter where it is. And in fact, so once again, I just want to say one thing. You shared with me before we went live that there's a user conference for Virtuous going on right now, and you said you'd do this anyway. So the person was originally scheduled, Brittany Schaff, wonderful person, very knowledgeable. She had a family emergency to tend to, so we wish her and her family well. But you came in the middle of having hundreds of people getting together for Virtuous. So thank you for doing this with all of us too.
Yeah, glad to do so, Jay. It's one thing that I value. It's kind of like you said, I'm an Energizer Bunny. What that actually builds, like what fills my cup and what fills my stomach and like where I want to grow and do is our community and our nonprofits, both nonprofit leaders and on the for-profit. I feel like there's a connection there. And like it's a community. Like last week, I was on a road trip across the country because I couldn't fly and someone helped me. To me, it's just like I don't know. I grew up in Pittsburgh watching Mr. Rogers, and it was all about help your neighbor and being kind to your neighbor. And it's all about like helping each other at whatever need happens. So yeah.
Indeed. So today, I know we're talking about digital, which is often the disembodied brother of development. where people don't really, reach out. They just sort of send out, or as somebody just told me a few days ago, spray and pray.
I,
That's not what you do.
no.
So
Yeah.
maybe before we begin with all the stuff, just kind of, when you think about digital, what do you think about?
It's interesting. It's like nothing's really changed, right? Like, and like, but things change and we have to like be able to adapt along the journey. One thing that I pride myself on is, I've made a little over 4,500 face-to-face donor visits in my career and raised enormous amounts of money for it. But 25 years ago, when I got into this space, I, just graduated college. I was running a nonprofit foundation, and it was interesting. I don't share this story a lot, but I just think it's so serendipitous to where we are today. Is I would do donor visits. I would go into a city, I'd make 10 to 15 donor visits, and then I would fly home, right? And so I was going to Houston. It was one of my first trips. And what I did back in 2002, before we thought email was going to die, was I would send an email to all of our constituents in the Houston metro area, and whomever opened the email got a phone call from me. And I could track that. This is 2002. I could track who opened an email through Constant Contact. Inside the email was, 3 different links or 3 different articles. Was like endowment, campaign, and scholarship, whatever it was. Whatever that individual clicked on was what I talked about on the phone. And this is 2002. And like you fast forward to where we are today, all of this stuff is still available and then some. I was able to, have a higher close rate because I was visiting with the right people, qualifying my visits and like having an opportunity. But again, it's just, how are you using the tools necessary today to grow generosity? And
Yeah.
selfishly, that's why I came to Virtuous, because I was like, wow, this is all here. But like that I was doing manually.
And so I guess that's to say that if someone who's joining us today doesn't have a lot of tools yet, first of all, you can get them. But if you don't have them, there are ways to apply much of what you'll be sharing today, even if you don't. But it takes intentionality, I guess.
1,000%. Yep.
Okay, so where do you want to begin?
You want to go through some of the presentation you and I walked through?
Sure, it sounds great.
Let's do that. Let's do that. Folks, thanks so much for coming in. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Everyone's all around the world right now. I really do value that. Please do connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm very big in our community and helping others and opening doors and being able to grow generosity. And you'll see all the different pieces. I do a lot of like feedback on where I go and what I see, just from a thought leadership standpoint. But, like I said, or like Jay said, I'm coming in here to, share with you a little bit ideas about donor acquisition and lifetime value. And some of the things that I've seen really just over the past, couple decades is really, and Jay's alluded to it a little bit, is there's 2 major problems in traditional fundraising that we're seeing on a regular basis right now. The first one is this idea, you hit the nail on the head, this spray and pray approach, right? We have this unresponsive one-to-many donor experiences. As a quote unquote recovering fundraiser, as I like to share, is, one of the things that we've always been held accountable to is our revenue and what we're raising on an annual basis. And what's easy for us with fewer staff and fewer employees and, what's going on in our organizations, what are we doing? We're increasing the gift ask array by 3% and sending the same message to the same group of people and not having the increased results as we expected. But we're just sending this messaging out. And what you'll see across the board is this unresponsive one-to-many experience, right? Like we're acquiring all of these individuals through events or mail or peer-to-peer or digital or friends, whatever it might be. And we're putting them in our marketing communication calendar and we're communicating them all the same way. Right? Like I come from the Boy Scouts, right? Like, so we're saying it's Boy Scout popcorn season time. It's Giving Tuesday, which I frankly think it's nonprofit Hunger Games, right? Like we're all competing against other nonprofits, but we're all communicating this date to Tuesday after Thanksgiving to be able to say the same message to all our constituents. It's year-end fundraising, but we're talking at our constituents instead of with them. And what you're seeing across the industry, a 76% attrition rate of first-time donors. So when someone gives to our organization, 24% of them are actually staying with us. That's across the entire sector of what we're seeing. And it's because of this I prefer mass communication versus this whole, one-to-one personalized idea. And honestly, I'm gonna go back to this too, because, as Jay alluded, I'm here in Phoenix right now at our headquarters. I travel often. And, frankly, you think about your own individual people and how in your donor experience and your family, I'm a Marriott guy. So when I walk into my hotel room on the television, it says, "Welcome, Mr. Tamales." right? And so our donors are expecting that one-to-one experience in a personalized manner because they're getting it from the for-profit space. And it's a Marriott, right? But and to me, giving is very personal to where I want to contribute. And like we're giving our hard-earned cash, we're disposable income, we're hoping generosity, we're trying to drive impact, and we're giving to our charities. So why can't our charities and our nonprofit organizations have that same reciprocation back to each other and our donors? The other big issue that we're seeing across the board is our unresponsive teams, right? Like we have 4 different silos here, right? With fundraising, we have marketing, we have program, we have finance. We all share walls with our partners in our organization, but we don't share metrics and we don't share stories and we don't share content. And so like our fundraising would be focused very much on like what's our goals and our revenue. We have our marketing team, which is these misaligned key performance indicators where we're focused on, to your point earlier, Jay, it was like we're looking at like marketing, we're looking at how many clicks, how many likes, what's our social look like. And then honestly, the program is our main driver for everything that we do. So with no money from the fundraising, there's no mission for the program. And really the finance team really needs to work across the board. And really, I mean, how many of you guys in the chat feel like there's an enormous amount of silos inside your organizations and not everyone is working collaboratively across the board to be able to grow generosity and work together? I'm really hoping that I see this number dwindling more and more as folks are getting more engaged and communicating and open, breaking down those silos. But these are the main 2 things that I see across the board. And I do want to get to the original topic, but I want to talk a little bit about like this idea. We at Virtuous believe that this is our core methodology. This is what drives us. This is what informs all of our technology, informs all of our communication, informs all of our thought leadership. And frankly, it's the reason why I came to Virtuous, because when I learned about responsive fundraising, I was like, I am a believer. I want to tell all nonprofits about it, and I want to help grow global generosity across the board. And it's really, really simple when you start thinking through it. And as we start thinking about this digital marketing and retention and how to grow donor experiences, this is a great framework to start. And you can do this in every different place you are in, right? So you want to start off in that top left corner. And you want to start listening to our donors. We want to listen to our givers, our constituents, our individuals, and start asking the question why people are giving, what inspires them, what gets them involved, why do they want to open your email, why do they want to come to your volunteer experience, why do they want to come to your facility for a tour, like what is their general purpose? Like you start asking those questions and surveying our constituents and start building out the data set there. We want to connect with them, which is the top right corner. We want to connect with them personally, right? And then so from there, we can create these automatic touch points as needed and connect with and meet our donors where they are, right? So we want to, so if someone's interested only in the performing arts of our organization, we communicate with them and talk to them about the performing arts and start having that campaign directly toward there. From there, we want to go to the bottom right, which is suggest. We as fundraisers, right? We go back to that first bullet point that I was talking about, the big problem. All we do is ask. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm not at all. I'm just saying let's suggest the appropriate next step. Sometimes the next step is not the ask for a gift. It might be learn more about our organization, to volunteer, to come get a tour, to visit with our program team. There's a whole, to join our board, like to become more active. These are the appropriate next steps in this journey. And then the final step is learn, where we want to test and we want to validate everything that we do. Just because we did this campaign last year does not mean we have to do it again this year, or the gala, or the event, or the product, or whatever it might be. The main driver of all this, and this is one of my favorite phrases just as my mindset as a fundraiser, is this idea of data drives creative drives results, and moves forward down that path, right? So this is the main piece here where we want to listen first, we want to connect, we want to suggest, and we want to learn. And that's the idea of responsive fundraising to be able to get in there. And from that, if you start building out these responsive donor experiences, you can start now taking people down these individual journeys, right? And creating these personal pathways. So let's say we have Samantha here who's an event, just came from an event. Now, immediately after, she gets a thank you email, she gets a phone call, she gets a mailer, and then she gets a personal touch point by someone on the team, right? And so someone who comes in, like Barnabas, our second one who comes in at the mail, like he comes in, he has his own different journey, different from Samantha. And what you're going to see if you start building out these dynamic, personalized journeys, you're going to see an increased retention, increase average gift, and increase engagement because we're connecting with the individual personally and we're breaking down those individual silos, and we'll walk through that. What's even better is if we take another step and just breaking down those 4 silos, those 3 walls in between our organizations, and start becoming a responsive team. And taking that framework that I shared earlier and starts communicating, saying, hey, let's have marketing talk to finance and finance talk to program and program talk to fundraising, and start sharing our data and our insights, getting our marketing team together with our fundraising team so that we can work collaboratively, because marketing does a great job of storytelling and communicating and grabbing ideas and campaigns. We are great at fundraising and seeing the experience and asking and taking individuals from, cradle to grave, right? The whole idea of getting folks involved and engaged. But we got to work collaboratively, and with no program, there's no mission from money, right? On both sides. And we all need to work collaboratively on there. But the real challenge on all of that, right, is it feels like we're boiling the ocean. And it's like, how do we get there, and how do we be able to grow generosity at scale? I'm in a senior leadership meeting a couple months ago, and I thought it was just one of the most impressive things that one of our leaders said was, he's like, he lives by a mindset, he lives by a mindset of 1%. He wants to do 1% better every day, personally and professionally, for his marriage, for his family, for his work, for his career. And it's interesting, when he took a step back, I think we as nonprofit leaders need to do the same thing. We can't get to the finish line immediately, but if we do 1% better every day in the work that we're doing, we can be able to move the needle and start actually boiling the ocean in one giant swoop, right? We're not going to be able to do it overnight, but we're going to be able to get there down the journey. And this is what we have at Virtuous. We've been talking so much about this idea of a maturity model on helping individual organizations to go down this pathway for success, to be fully mature, fully responsive, and be able to drive these action plans to be able to do it. I'm going to skim over a good amount of it just because I want to focus in on our topic here. But the 5 key areas that we have when it comes to this large level maturity model is, the first step is we need to have our data health and our reporting, and we need to be, confident in what we do with our data, right? Then we want to lean into our integrated tech and start going down that path. We want to segment, and then we want to create these personas within our institutions. We want to build out the dynamic campaigns, and then the new great buzzword in the industry right now is AI and personalization, which means artificial intelligence. But to be fully effective and fully mature, you have to be able to do all 5 of those different places and go down that path. And I don't think anyone is there yet, but these are going to be the building blocks and giving you the tools and the pathway to be able to go through each one of them. You don't have to master each one of these pillars and then go to the second pillar or the third pillar. You just need to know that, hey, these are the things we're working on as an organization, and we need to be aware about it to be able to grow and move to that next step. So the first phase, I'm going to skim over this as, because I want to be mindful of our time. But really is, this idea of data health and tools and where we are. And, James Barksdale, I'm going to age myself here actually with how many people remember Netscape, right? Like it's gone, right? It's an organization that's been there. I've aged myself a little bit. But James Barksdale says a great quote is, if we have data, let's look at the data. If all we have are opinions, let's go with mine. And right? I mean, we need to be, data driven. Lucy, I love what you said. The work effort to metrics, right? Like data drives our strategy and everything we do. We can do this both on the front line of, fundraising, of saying, hey, what are our people, when we ask them a question, what are they interested in, and start jotting that in the system, in the CRM, as well as responding to an email or a survey or whatever it might be, right? And so data really has to be the driver of everything we do there, because without it, we can't be able to get to the automation. We can't get to the persona, and I'll get to that here in a second. But how many of us, I mean, in our chat, how many feel like superbly uber confident in your donor database communication, right? Like how many people know that, it's Eric with a K, not Eric with a C, or it's Eric and Kate Tamales, right? Like how many people in our own database feel confident in what is in there? Right? Not many is what, and it's a work in progress. Thank you, Veronica. It's fantastic. I think the CCS report a couple years ago, their philanthropy pulse report came out. It was about 60% of nonprofit leaders trust the information that's in their database, which is a big challenge. That number should be much larger because we need to be able to focus in on those metrics because that's our base. That's what we need to be able to do to build out these personas and the segmentations that we're going to get to in a second. We need to have coverage in our contact information. We need to be how many folks are out there requesting new phone information. Like Jay shared a little bit of my background. I've worked at 4 or 5 different organizations in the last 20 some years. Every single time I went to a new organization, I had a new email address, right? Like, so how many times are we doing an email append in our own database with our donors and our communication and what they want to hear and how to be able to communicate to them? The other question is, I'll ask the team here in the audience, how many people have changed their cell phone number in the last 5 or 10 or 20 years? That number is much smaller, right? I still have the same phone number that I had when 25, 30 years ago that I have today. And so what I'm fascinated with, especially now, I mean, it's an election cycle and I'm getting text messages all the time through both sides of the aisle. We're opening our text messages at a rapid speed right now. And so why can't we communicate with our donors through text and through communication and through those different areas? And ultimately, we really need to break down those silos and have team-wide visibility, making sure everyone trusts the metrics and trusts the KPIs and trusts where we're going as an organization to be able to do that. We need to be able to do email hygiene. We need to look at data on a regular basis. We need the NCOA. I know it's another acronym, but it's National Change of Address. We need to continually, at the minimum, I would recommend twice a year, and definitely before any direct mail or direct response appeal, we do an NCOA so that we're sending it to the right people, right? Like that's basic. And there's 3 ways you can do it. You can go through your post office and have an NCOA done for your database. You can work with your agency that or of record. They actually have the ability to do that. What I would recommend is doing it directly inside your database, because it's also the most secure, right? Because you're not going to be having to upload and import and then hope that nothing gets duplicated and change of names or whatever it might be. And a lot of databases have the ability to do that, and you can do it directly in there. I also am a big believer in having policies around data health. The database administrator needs to set the flag, plant the flag in the ground and say, hey, these are the rules, no shadow databases, nothing. If you're going to communicate to people, this is the way to do it. This is the way you update your reports and update everything else, because we need to be able to have confidence in it. Because the minute we have a whole host of individuals around the table that are playing around inside the database, that's where it starts having the data, challenges, right? And the misspellings and everything else. But then we also need to have this fundraising operations together on a regular basis that reviews this process to be able to get in there and start having these weekly key performance indicator reviews, right? Like we need to start looking at the numbers and making sure the entire team is together on a high level. And if I was going to start anywhere, I would start here, right? I would start looking at these 3 criteria to really know our number of, for example, the first one over here on that far left is all about revenue tier, right? Like, are we a major giving shop? Are we a mid-level giving shop? Or are we an annual fund shop, right? Like, where are the majority of the donors coming this year? And how do we communicate with them? So in order to be able to know the lifetime value of our donors, that bigger base is the opportunity to start taking folks down longer donor journeys so that they could focus on estate planning or major giving or whatever it is. The middle chart is all about where the giving is on the course of the year, right? So if I'm as a senior leader in our organization, I want to start forecasting what I'm expecting our donors are going to be giving and where our revenue is going to be for the end of the fiscal year. I know that in May, we send out a large campaign, and that's where our largest opportunity is. And then in August, we do our gala. These are the opportunities that we can start doubling down and building these core personas around it. And frankly, folks, I think the most important for the metric to look at is our retention. Retention is the key thing. I'm a big believer in saying staff retention equals donor retention. So I very much value the work you guys are doing on a regular basis. So stay with the organization, stay with them, because the work you're doing matters and you're focusing on your community. So, and it's relationship building. And so we need to start looking at the, first to second, rate, the second to third donor gift, the third to fourth gift. All those things matter as we start breaking it down the pathway. So that's just the baseline of where we are to get our focus here. Then the other area, the next step would be about integrated tech and teams. And you can do this in a whole host of systems that you have currently. And really, one of the things that you'll see, again, I'm dating myself here, is this idea of David Letterman. He did a top 10 list back in the 90s and early 2000s. But this is from Monica on G2. She actually broke down like why it's important to integrate your software. And you can see number one is higher employee productivity. Number 6 is a 360-degree view of our customer information. Number 8, improved efficiencies across our teams. There's a whole host of things here, right? Error reduction, faster business process, improved security, reducing our costs, integrating our tech and our teams to be able to work collaboratively. Like I said to Jay earlier in the preview, was what I did 20 some years ago. It was hard because I was doing it singly, but today the tools are much more efficient and are available, and then some, and a lot more is available. And being able to have that cross collaboration to be able to focus on KPIs, integrating our marketing and our donor data is like mind blowing, right? Like, let's look at the opportunity of connecting our website to our CRM, or the folks that are opening emails to our home CRM, right? Like if the text messages or the web visits and the videos, all those different things matter. And so now instead, it's the analogy I like sharing. If you've heard me present, I love this analogy of it's finding Nemo, right? Like it's this it's a group of seagulls that are all like mine. And there's a fish above that flock of seagulls, which is the donor or the constituent. And really, like, the donor sees it as one flock, as the organization or the nonprofit. And in reality, all of our seagulls are different departments in our organization. We've got special events, we got, marketing, we got annual giving, we got our planned giving. Everyone is fighting over that donor and talking to them separately. Whereas in reality, we need to integrate the marketing and our donor team together and talking to that individual as one, rather than 10 different organizations within we're duplicating the work we're doing, right? We're doing too much and we're stepping on each other's toes. And that's where the opportunity to be able to focus on program and volunteerism. And here's what I would suggest. Here's just a snapshot of what I would suggest. If I was sitting in the chair again today, I would want to figure out what my home base is. Here in this image, it's virtuous, and really figuring out what systems and programs that actually integrate into that platform, right? So if you're using a HubSpot or a Salesforce or whatever it might be, these are the opportunities to start saying, okay, can I get my marketing team to in product or my volunteer database to be able to connect to my CRM? I mean, I heard a story a couple of months ago, and it really hurt my heart. She did the right thing, but it was interesting. It was a food bank, and the organization received a $100,000 contribution from a donor. And the CEO did the right thing. She called the family and said, "Hey, thank you so much for the contribution. It went through her piece, right? The Penelope Burke piece." She got the wife, and the wife said to her, the CEO was, "Well, did you know my husband is inside your building right now? He's actually downstairs packing boxes and food and paraphernalia for your community." The CEO didn't even know that the volunteer that made the 6-figure contribution was in her building that moment. And that's the challenge we have, right? Our volunteer database is over here. Our marketing database, our CRM, our giving, everything is so stagnant. No one is communicating to each other. And if we had a 360-degree view that everybody could be able to collaborate and work together and actually thank the donor appropriately. This is where I love to talk about this idea of creating this idea of generosity ops and start accelerating that opportunity, getting your team together to start identifying what are the things that we need to be focusing our attention on, right? Like if we take our development team, our marketing team, and our program, and we start creating, I'm not saying create new position within the institution because we don't have enough headcount, we don't have enough budget. What I am suggesting is taking 10 or 20% of every senior leader inside of these different silos and having them come together and creating this generosity ops team where they can start focusing on those insights and those reports and focusing on the longevity of the organization and being collaborative as a unit and seeing where we are. We at Virtuous, we use HubSpot internally. And if you've been participating in any of our stuff that we do, we actually did a responsive summit. It was all virtual and it was all electronic, and we used a platform. We didn't use Zoom, but we used a similar platform. But our revenue operations team actually identified where can we find a data or a view company or a videographer company that connects to HubSpot. Right? Like, so that's what generosity ops should start looking at. What is our giving page? What is our volunteer programs? What is our marketing? What is our text, our video, all those different things, making sure that they all work collaboratively and that our teams are communicating effectively and purposefully. Here's where the bulk of where we want to go. Now that we got through the high level of the first two stages, I really want to talk more about the idea of segmentation and personas, because now that we have aligned teams, now that we have good data, now that we have everybody going in the right direction, now what do we do with it? And this goes with that first. So the first two sections are all about listening and connecting, right? Now it's all about connecting and suggesting. And so through segmentation, I am hoping, I mean, if you're in the chat, please share how many folks are segmenting their donors and how many folks are actually doing personas. Those are two little subsets, right? We should be looking at segmentation on a regular basis of first-time donor, major donor, planned gift donor. Like, those are big buckets, right? Personas are very specific underneath those buckets. And we want to be able to drive personalized communication. The more personalized it is, the higher value is. I got to move closer to this light. The more it drives value and increases generosity. We can create personas based on our affinity, our topic, our giving, engagement. If we're asking on the front end on our constituents of what their interests are, this is where we can figure out what their focus is. That's that topic or affinity. And it's getting rid of the mass marketing based on persona, right? It's getting rid of the mass marketing of saying, hey, we're going to ask everybody for $1,000 or everybody for $500, whatever it might be, because we're going to start being able to do it. I personally like to add a name to it. I mean, I'm a simple guy, so it's very, I'm like, okay, so we got the Katie persona, we got the Jeremy persona, we got the Diana persona, but these are the folks that are going to say, hey, these are individuals that are interested in, workforce community, they're under 40, they're interested, they drive Volvos, whatever it may be for your organization. It's further than just a lie bunt or a side bunt to be able to do that. Utilizing tools that are out there that are at your disposal to start segmenting and creating automation around it. There's a lot of technology platforms that have the ability to create automatic tags. Instead of you going, or dynamic tags, or folks call it as well, which is basically saying, hey, once someone if they're a first-time donor and they make their second gift, then the system can automatically drop first time and add a second gift time donor or a recurring or sustaining, whatever it might be. But start looking at your technology, because those are tools are available to start freeing up our database time to be able to focus in on that. And if I was going to start anywhere, honestly, you can't boil the ocean, but you can do 1% better. I would look at 3 to 5 personas inside our own organization. I would take a step back. I'd bring on an agency and I start identifying, maybe like do a survey or a feasibility study or whatever it might be to identify who are our donors and what are our top personas inside our institution, right? We think because we're in the know, but sometimes you can't see the forest through the trees, but we need to take a step back. We need to pause and bring someone from outside to say, hey, who are our donors? Who is the people that want to give to our organization? What do they look like? And then start building that out in communication, right? And now that we have, like I did this earlier in that second step, now that marketing and volunteer and fundraising are aligned, we can start communicating to those personas effectively, and it matters, right? And so I said earlier, talking through this responsive fundraising mindset, listen, connect, suggest. When we connect with people, this is my friend Tim Kachuriak from Next After. It's one of my favorite quotes is multi-channel donors, those who give both online and offline, are worth 3 times more online only or offline only donors, and our first year donor retention is 2 times higher. And what that means is that idea of connecting. Once we connect with our constituent and connect with our donor, and they give both in the mail and digitally, they are worth 300% more than just anyone who just gives only through mail and only through digital. 300%. Why wouldn't we double down on that? And I saw something, I can't remember who did it, but it was fascinating. He posted on LinkedIn, I would say probably about 6 months ago now, was, I am a online donor, I'm a digital donor, I'm a planned gift donor, I'm a major donor, I give through mail. Like, I am just a donor. Take all of that away and we just see each other as donors. So let's communicate as much as we can and do automation and do the opportunity and ask folks to give in multi channels, because our donor retention rate is 2 times higher than anything else. And donor retention, I think, is the most important thing here that we do to grow generosity within our own institutions, because it matters. And if you start doing multi-channel, here's a great opportunity, right? Like, and when I say campaign in this slide, I'm talking more of a marketing structure or storytelling or whatever it might be. And I'm going to use like the Boy Scouts, for example, right? So we, the camping program, and we want to tell a single story all about camp and what the importance is of summer camp for youth, men and boys and girls, right? And so we can do this through mail, text, social, email. And so now we have this story. But then when we have Steven here, we send him a video through, an email, right? And how many folks are taking the idea of focused on email and video? We should be looking at video on our phone and being able to utilize a lot of resources and start integrating that directly into our email, because I think those short form videos are seeing a lot higher in watch views and more engagement. People are on Reels or TikTok and everything else, so they're used to it. And we should embrace it. It doesn't have to be professional. It can be totally scrappy and all the different things. But on that first day, Steven gets an email video story. Then about 5 days later, he gets a phone call from someone on the team saying, hey, did you get my email about camp? I wanted to hear any stories. Do you have any questions about it? And then a week or two later, he gets a text message to go to the story on the website. And on that website is probably a link or a call to action or whatever it might be. And then 2 weeks later, he gets a postcard in the mail, probably with a QR code and all those different pieces to be able to round it out. So 4 different stories or 4 different communications, but one story across the board, you're going to see an increase in opportunity and engagement with that donor. And this isn't just a start stop, right? Like, any new person, like I could come in as a new donor. Now I get that same story. These stories stack on each other. You don't have to do a start from scratch and say, okay, in the month of July, I'm only going to talk about camp. No, it stacks on the individual donor and that pathway for success. And that's where you're going to be able to integrate and be able to grow generosity and take folks out there. The challenge for individuals is, all of our organizations go through similar structures and similar strategies. We just have to take the pause and identify what's the appropriate map, right? What's the timing of each of these? So I'm going to go back to this, right? Like, is an email the first time that we should do, or is it a text message? And it's going to depend on the donor, right? It's going to depend on the story. It's going to depend on the mission and your tech and whatever situation you have in your organization. But those are the things. But when you start creating that connected story, utilizing the marketing team for their storytelling, you're going to be able to grow all the impact across the board. Everyone's going to work as a team. Everyone's going to be able to see everything, and we're going to be able to move forward where we want to go. This is where the opportunity is to start looking at today. If I was back in the space, I would lean in on all the data signals from third parties that are out there. There's so many more resources out there today. Jay and his team could share even further the outside data set to be able to have wealth screening data, channel preference. You can get age, you can get gender, you can get marital status. Gosh, you can get campaign and, looking at the FEC stuff. I know we're in election cycle right now, but there's a whole host of stuff. You can actually see their interests. And I would pool all of that data, and then I would create a scoring model within my own institution to say, hey, what's the affinity? What's the propensity? What's their capacity? And start building out all the data sets on there. So I'm communicating my personas with the right people in the right channel, because, we don't want to spend too much money and be good stewards of our finances to be able to do that. And then here, the other nice thing is to be able to start building out demographic data, seeing, okay, how many donors do we actually have in the Houston market that we should be sending folks to? Should we do a salon event? Should we be able to be boots on the ground? Should we tell our story? All these different things matter in these different areas. And I know I'm giving you a lot, and so keep going through this. This is the segmentation. I'm going to pause. If there's any questions, please jump in, ask in the chat, and be active. I'm glad to answer. I know I'm a kid from Pittsburgh, so I talk fast, but we're here. But the fourth phase I want to talk about is this dynamic campaigns. And this is where the bulk of everything kind of compiles onto, is really building out these individual campaigns based on each person's time and behavior, right? Like, so I said earlier, when Samantha comes from an event, immediately after we send her an email with just, gratitude, and then a text message and an email and a phone call, right? And so each person has their own individual journey, mapping out what is the right touch point along that journey for each different one of those different expense. I think peer-to-peer is the hardest way to raise money because they're so segmented. So now we have to do a little bit more education and customer journeys and engagement and teaching them about our organization rather than just asking them on that first visit, right? Or that first touch point. And here's, 4 campaigns that, if I was back in the space, this is where I would start. I would start with a new donor welcome series. I think new donor welcome series, I've seen it across the board when someone gives for a first time to an institution. And frankly, I do a lot. I do a lot of secret shopping and giving to organizations just to see how they actually respond and communicate. Because frankly, I want to see their best practices and I want to start seeing what works and what isn't and suggesting it to other individuals. But in this new donor welcome series, we're getting an email, we're getting a phone call, we're getting a text message just to be able to start teaching us about our organization. We've got Courtney down in the bottom left. That is a lie bunt. What is incredible here, the one thing I'm seeing more, lie bunt is someone who's given last year, but not yet this year, is, we've got a text message, a phone call, and then maybe a postcard. This journey here, I'm seeing a lot of reactivation on the postcard. So after 13 or 14 months, when a postcard gets sent to the individual, and again, maybe there's a QR code on there to start engaging them back to our website to give, we're seeing a huge increase of lie bunts giving from that reactivation. Because again, it's a different conversation. We're not asking for a second gift. We're saying, hey, did you forget about us? Like, let's tell us our story. We have to re-engage the case. We need to this for support. And we need to have that conversation with our individuals. We've got Charlie on the bottom right that went onto our website and that maybe he downloaded an impact report or whatever it might be. We're not going to ask him for money on the first mailer, right? Like, we're going to start teaching him about who we are as an institution and hopefully get him engaged and maybe invite him to volunteer or learn more about our organization. And start analyzing and seeing if he has capacity or affinity to our institution. And then the other great one is Jenna here, where she abandoned our donor page. Right? How many folks are putting stuff in their Target shopping cart or Amazon or name brand store, whatever it might be. And a day later, you get an email saying, hey, did you forget about your item in your cart? Do you want to purchase it? This is Jenna, right? Like, Jenna's not uncharitable. She was just busy. She went to your giving page or your website, and now it's a reactivation in a different way, right? So let's start communicating those. And these are some great campaigns that I've seen out there. I've seen birthday campaigns just to focus on generosity. Like 3 days before anyone's birthday, we send out a postcard saying happy birthday. The morning of, we send an email saying happy birthday. And in the afternoon, there's a task from someone on this team to be able to make a phone call to call and say thank you and happy birthday, right? Marketing and automation with our CRM, mapping out those journeys. And that's where the opportunity is to focus in the life cycle for our donors and work with marketing to create those journeys and identify what's the best story to be able to go forward on that. Jay, I'm going to leave it here. I'm going to just jump in here. I mean, the last one is AI. I'm not going to go into it because we've got 14 or 15 minutes left, but I just wanted to ask, like, I mean, any questions on that? And we have a whole host of stuff. I can go deeper on that model, and this is the website for it if you guys are interested in, but love to open it up with you, Jay.
Yeah, I don't think you gave us nearly enough, Eric. I think that's part of the problem. No, thank you for all of that. And we did put your contact information in the chat so people can find that. And before we jump into some questions, and also we'd appreciate questions from everybody in the room here. I do want to let everybody know what's coming up next, just so you don't forget. And so next week we have Rich Todd and Paul D'Alessandro talking about why your nonprofit should care about stewardship of donor dollars. That's coming up on Tuesday. And here we're talking about not stewardship of donors, but donor dollars. It's a little bit different spin and very important. And then on Thursday, we have a CFRE accredited session with Jennifer Oyer of the 5 relationships for successful nonprofit leadership. 2 things you do not want to miss. So do put those in your calendar. And if you want more information on that and the rest of what we do in the Philanthropy Mastermind series, you can find all that on the DonorSearch site at donorsearch.net under the resource tab, or you can just look for the QR code at the end of this session today, and you can sign up to be on the list. I'm sure that there are a lot of questions here, and I want to just ask everybody in the room a question first. Much of what you described, I think, is scalable, but I'm interested to know what the scale is here for many people. Like you talked about marketing and fundraising, or marketing and, let's say, major gifts being in different silos. Maybe that depends also upon the size of the organization.
Yep.
So if you all wouldn't mind just letting us know in the chat how many people are in development or fundraising in your organization, I think that could be very helpful as we begin the rest of the conversation. So just let us know. Are you 5 people? Are you 50 people? 1 person? 500 people? And we're starting to get the answers here. So 3 people, 1 person, you're the hero of the day. 4.5 people, 3 people, 1 private, 6 government. You're not alone in that, having government support like that. 1 for your clients. So different kinds of things. And what I can tell you is, in our audience, some people speak, some people don't in the chat. So people, please keep those coming. Is that what we find typically is it looks like the architecture of the sector, meaning that under 5% of our organizations are doing more than $10 million in business.
Yep.
And that means that the rest of us are just trying to make things work with small offices. So Eric, in view of the kinds of sizes of offices that we're seeing here today, how would you scale this conversation so they could find a way to find the right tech and apply it to tell those stories in ways that are segmented, like you talked about with the different personas, finding the personas and applying them?
It's interesting. I mean, you're spot on, right? Like everyone always thinks the grass is greener, right? Like just because I worked at St. Jude, it's the biggest, largest institution, right? Like they raised $2 billion. They have it like everything we do in nonprofit is the same. Like we have the same boards and same volunteer challenges. We have missions, we have goals, we have revenue. Like the silos are just larger at those institutions, right? And more challenging. And so I've worked at others. I worked at smaller organizations where I was the single shingle individual, doing everything, marketing, development, public relations, you name it, I did it. And I think that's just the sector we're in. But I would go back at the beginning of like, it's 1%. It's just saying, okay, and 1% better every day. And knowing if I'm a team of 2 or 3 or small, knowing what I'm good at, stay in my own lane. If I'm a people person, I would focus in on those relationships. If I don't understand data, it's not bad to hire consultants or agencies or subject matter experts that can help drive in that conversation for data. Bring those folks in. That's what's great about our sector is the for-profit. Frankly, the people on the for-profit side, I think, have more experience than the nonprofit leaders. And we're all here to work collaboratively together and just figuring out what works for you and being able to bring in those subject matter experts.
We do have a question from Alora who had asked, what's the best way for an organization or for organizations to assess where they are on the maturity model?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, like if you go to that website, the responsive dash or virtuous dash model, there's a 52-page document on it. And so that goes deeper and wider, even further than what I was actually breaking down. And you can see, so there's an infographic, too long didn't read. There's infographics and conversations around it. But you can see where you are. Everyone's going to be different and no one's going to be completely perfect on all 5, but it's still going to give you the tools necessary to go to each one of those steps. And, I'm not going to say this, just because you're a 3 doesn't mean you're better than the 2. Like everybody has little pieces about all those different pillars.
Yeah. And well, as you said, it's the 1% better. I love that quote. You had another quote, which really struck me too. And I guess it was from Tim Kachuriak talking about the percentage difference by just making that change. Could you just repeat that? And then maybe tell us how you think people could apply it in both small, medium, and large shops.
Yeah, I mean, let's go back to it. I'll pull it up on the screen.
I thought it was
a great
powerful
quote. It's a powerful quote. Multi-channel donors, those who give both online and offline, are worth 3 times more. And if you go to multi-channel donor, I think that's what it is, multichannelDonor.com. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jack, when you go look for it, multichannelDonor.com or multichannelnonprofit.com. I think that's what it is. You can actually see the entire report. Note, Next After and Virtuous, we donated, I think it was $1,000 to 100 organizations. And we tracked how they communicated, what the retention, all the pieces around it. And we were thanked by 127 different organizations. And please connect with me on LinkedIn. I'll find the quote when we get done here. And I can send it over to you. But 127 organizations thanked us, which meant someone in the 100 sold our list to our name and brokered. And so this right here, I think, is incredible because you're seeing a retention rate increase, engagement increase, the fact that folks are giving both online and offline. And that's the fact that we want to be able to break into. I want to find this link.
Oh, that's, I was doing the same thing you were. I think we're all trying to answer Lena's question about which link. As you were talking about that, Eric, it really strikes me that one of the questions people have is getting those two things to jive, right? One is staying in your lane and growing that 1% better every day. And the other is applying a new channel of activity, whether it's a database that's not a shadow database, but integrates with whatever you're using as your central repository, your source of truth. And making sure that we don't take energy away from what's working, but we're still investing in the future. And part of this has to do, probably, I would assume, with the personas themselves. You didn't talk so much about, for example, age, but there are differences that we see in terms of the demography of people who are, let's say, under 27 and those who are over 45 in terms of their responsiveness to different kinds of things. You talked a lot about text, and you also made reference to all those text messages we're all getting this week. So there are a lot of text messages flying around, but some people seem to be more responsive than text than others. So when people are thinking about that, let's explore using this avenue. Let's use a tool to do it. I'm just wondering how you advise people to figure out what's right for them and then how to apply it, especially when it's something like that.
You know, it's interesting. Well, it's actually funny, Jay. I live in a swing state, as you know, Pennsylvania.
Yep.
And I was just sharing a story earlier. Is I'm getting blasted by both sides of the party on texting. And I'm gonna give everybody the best advice. I actually went in and created a contact record in my phone for Democrats and Republicans, because now I know, because what we do, right? You get these 303 numbers and we always open it and look at it. And then when the Boy Scouts send, I do the same thing. I have a Boy Scout or contact record in there. So I know what they're sending me. But I think on the work side, if we're going to send a text, there's so many great programs and systems out there that actually communicate directly in our CRM. And as the former fundraiser, it pains me to say, yeah, I had a shadow database. I used my own stuff when I was making those donor visits, and it wasn't right for the organization. And that's why I started this conversation where the database administrator has to plant the flag and take control and say, okay, these are the standard procedures, and this is what we all work together, and we all are moving a ship together rather than having everybody go rogue, but being able to utilize the right systems. And that starts with leadership, to be honest with you.
Well, that brings up a question that happens most of the time at these sessions, which is how do we convince people to make the investments? And this is both investments of resources, but it's also of time, because we can see that right in this room, just that people have answered, there are people in shops with 15 people and others with 1. So what you've talked about is a way of thinking about the relationships we have. So how do you help or how do you advise organizations to make their argument to leadership?
Don't get me wrong. Change is hard. Change is terrible, right? Like, we all love that warm blanket and the comfortability of where we are.
Right.
Everything we do, right? Like, in our families, in our faith, in our personal, our professional, everywhere. It's hard to get outside that box, but we need to do it as organizations, and we need to do it for the growth of the institution, right? And it's going to be little steps. It's that 1% that I keep going back to. But it's like, when I wanted to create a new program inside one of my organizations, I brought on a board member. I talked them through it. I said, this is where I want to go. Then he came to me, and he actually was in a conversation where he said to me, he's like, bring the data, and that quote I shed from James Barksdale, data drives everything we need to do. And the data informed decision is the best one. And so it's kind of proof of concept. And when you start being able to say, okay, text messaging is something where I want to go, I'm going to go down this rabbit hole and start testing it. I'm going to create 2 models, right? I'm going to say, I'm going to text 100 people, and I'm not going to text to 100 people, and see what comes out of it. And maybe it is a success for us, and maybe it's a bust. It's different for every nonprofit, different constituent, different personas, everything else. But we just need to test and let the data drive what's best for our organization.
I want to ask you about something we talked about more in the title than in the
Mhm.
conversation today, and that's a good thing,
Mhm.
maybe, but still, people will ask, which is about acquisition.
Yeah.
So we know acquisition is expensive,
Mhm.
but a lot of people feel like they need to do it.
Yeah.
So, uh, how from the time that you started, you talked about that and what life was like then versus the way it is today. Are there ways that people can do acquisition that are more thoughtful, more effective, and more cost effective?
Yeah. The acquisition's hard, right? Like I'm a big fan of retention. I think the people in our database, it's funny. It's like people are like, oh, let's get new people to give to our organization. But what about the people that we have already in our institution, inside our CRM? Let's deepen the relationship. Let's date our donors. Let's get them more engaged and tell them the impact, tell them the story, because that's where you're going to see the 3X and 5X. That's going to be the quick growth. Acquisition is all about the future, right? Like we're going to continue to fill the bucket and get folks in, and that's where you're going to have like the metrics are going to be completely different. It's not going to be revenue focused. It's going to be interest and ability and impact and stories and how many we connect. And those are the things that be able to drive into then the next segment of being able to say, okay, now they could be a major donor. Maybe they're a planned gift opportunity, whatever it might be. But there's a whole host of places you can go. I think through, frankly, we always talk about time, talent, and treasure of our volunteers and our constituents. I go another step of like the ties and the testimonial, right? Let's get their volunteers to start telling the reasons why they're giving to our organization. Why are they donating their time to volunteer, to come in their personal time? Like those are, and then their influence network. Those are the places I would go to start with my acquisition because it's more insulary. And then, yeah, I do want to do list brokerage and opportunities and maybe down the path, or if look at my sister charities of what their path or their donors are. That's the path where I would start looking at acquisition. But acquisition, I think, is way for the future. But I would lean into retention today and
Yeah.
double click on that. So,
Thank you for all this, Eric. Really, really
yeah,
awesome. Really appreciate it. And really appreciate you taking time from hundreds of people probably waiting to hear from you.
yeah,
So once again, everybody, if you do want to learn more about what Eric's been up to, what he's going to be up to next, and if you want to, you can follow him also on LinkedIn because you won't see somebody with a more active travel schedule there. It's a lot of fun actually to watch. Do look to the chat for that. Or Eric, if you want to just share it verbally, sometimes that's helpful for those who are viewing the recording
yeah. I
later.
think Jack, you think you have it up there. It's like LinkedIn. My name is Eric Tamalo, so you can search me on there. Eric with a K. Thank you, Abby. That is spot on. The correct way to spell Eric. Sorry to the other Eric.
So that, and you'll find him, of course, at Virtuous and many other places, including on the conference circuit. So be on the lookout for that. I want to thank you again for doing this today. Thank all of you for hanging out with us. Once again, if you have thoughts about what we should be doing in the future, and I sure hope you do, that means we really need you to tell us. You're going to see a survey pop up as soon as you hit close. If you do me a big favor, just fill that out. Hopefully you'll give Eric a nice rating, but you also just tell us what we should be doing in the future. That
And
really,
you should
really
be
helps us.
surveying your constituents. Listen.
We really do listen.
Yeah.
So you'll find those even in word clouds we do at the end of every quarter or every 6 months. But for today, if you just tell us what we should be doing maybe this year, we'd really appreciate that. So we'll look for your responses. And until next time, just take care of yourselves out there. See you soon.
Thanks, everyone.